only one time last year, nobody showed up to maybe it was only one, maybe it was one or two to show a Chazarah, and Rav Nachum was like, well, you should still record it. And he's like, you should just do it and then record it, and then people will watch it. And I don't know if that happened, but I did record it. And so
okay.
I think he showed up. That's what it was. It was only Rav Nachum showed up. So
you just like had a cover with Rav Nachum.
Exactly. No, I think he was like, you just talk and I'll just listen. He would come to some of them and he would just like listen in, and every once in a while he would like chime in when he felt like something really needed to be said. So it was like it was
That's
really
cute.
cool.
That's good.
All right. So yeah, so where we were, right, he's dealing with a case of you have these, it's not 100% clear, but it seemed, and we'll get to this at the end, like they seem to be forced converts. And one of them has convinced the other to get married in a Catholic ceremony, even though they were going to get married beforehand when they were still Jews, it sounded like, if I got this all correctly.
Yeah, it seemed like they were going to get married beforehand, and then they didn't because there was some problem, probably to do with the aforementioned persecution.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then, right, he has so far rejected the idea that like, oh, they're adim to the fact that they live together, so clearly they have done kiddushin, right? He's
right. He's like knocking that down as much
exactly.
as
He said even according to the Geonim who say that, right, you know, Anadam Oseh Bilat Tel Bilat Znut applies universally, they would even agree that this doesn't count. So so there we go. And now we're going to get into kind of this, just to give us an intro, what he's one of the main things to get into now is the whole question of, well, wait a second, B'nai Noach have marriage. So
right. So then like what is going on?
Yes, maybe that they're married like B'nai Noach, and therefore they still like have a problem here. So
okay. Right. So right, the problem is not Ina Demo Sebi, that's new.
Exactly.
That they're married. Like in some non-assumed way.
So you want to take it or you want me to start?
I can start.
Go for it.
מכיוון שהתנו בנישואין חוקת עובדי כוכבים ובית במותם מפני החומר, הרי הוא כאילו פירושו שאין דעתם לשם קידושין כדת משה ויהודית, אלא בדרכי עובדי כוכבים שאינן בתורת קידושין וגיטין. So, because they decided to get married in this church, according to these non-Jewish practices, and the priest like pronounces what's going on, then obviously it must be that they weren't intending to do kiddushin according to like the Jews.
Exactly.
Okay. ואם כן, אינה כנשואה, אלא שהיא אצלו כמו פילגש ולא כתובה ולא קידושין. And so therefore she hasn't married him properly. She's just there as his pilegesh with no ketubah. And no
yeah, which is the important, right? So no get.
Is the key part for this purpose. וכי תימה, והאמרינם בסנהדרין דבני נוח בעולת בעל, יש להן...
I'll give you this. This is from the Gemara. בעולת בעל יש להם נכנסה לחופה ולא נבהלה אין להם.
אין להם, I see. Okay. Meaning what exactly? They have some notion of like you belong to someone.
Yeah,
from sex.
Exactly.
But so, we don't have some pre-procedure that is a marriage that then they have sex afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is very strange because in fact that is not how Catholics work.
That's because you have to consummate the marriage for it to count. Is that the
No, because like they don't have premarital sex.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. So they
like I don't know, maybe. Yeah. They don't have maybe they do, as long as you think that is.
It's a great question. So I think though he doesn't care at the moment what the Catholics think. He cares about what does Jewish law think about how non-Jews affect the marriage, essentially. Yeah.
Right. And it also might be that, right, like just to historicize it a little bit, that like in the time of the Gemara, like whatever Greco-Roman rules around this are like really different than like medieval Christian.
Also fair, yeah. So
hold on, there's something.
He's also at the end of the day, he's not going to be interested actually in that. What he's really interested in here is the fact that they do have marriage according to Sanhedrin, and that's the important thing.
Right.
So
ve'en lahem muzharin hem al eshet ish v'ne'argin alea, and they really care about eshet ish, and you're ne'arag for messing up with it. Ve'im ken b'nidon zeh sheve'er shetiyeh ishto kechukat ovdei kochavim. Hare hu ke'ilu amar la harayat ishti vivia kidin b'nei Noach. Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the way that they have to make sense of it by like fitting it into our framework.
Yeah, beautiful, right? It's like, we don't care if it works for the Catholics. We care, does what the Catholic marriage does work in the Bnei Noach framework that we have constructed in the Second Sanhedrin here. So
Lo hi de bein Noach ein lo ishut beishto ela lechayev et mino ritzono lomar bnei Noach acher sheva alea aval Yisrael eino chayav be'eshet bnei Noach de perush me'ate kra eshet re'ehu prat le'eshet acherim Sanhedrin and bet. Va'afilu isura midoraita leka mishum eshet ish אלא מגזירת בית דין של חשמונאי, שגזר שחייב עליה משום נידה שפחה בגויה אשת איש. גזירה משום אשת איש של ישראל. So this isn't even really a Dioraita thing. It's like this weird gzera. So then like.
Yeah. So the general idea is right. Eshet ish only applies to Ehu Dioraita. There is we have this as a sugya in Sanhedrin that you may know this, that the Beit Din Chashmonai, actually it's also in Avodah Zarah, the Beit Din Chashmonai had a gezerah against, sex between Jews and non-Jews for the following reasons, right? It was like a combination of, and not that any of them are Dioraita Isurim with a Bnei Noach, with a Bat Noach rather, but rather that they are rabbinic or Chashmonai Isurim. So, and there's a debate.
But I just don't understand how that has a bearing on the question of whether non-Jews have marriage, whether they don't have marriage in a recognizable way, right?
They do have, what he's saying is they do have it in a recognizable way. However, it doesn't apply when a Jew sleeps with a non-Jew, right? That doesn't, right. In other words, you haven't violated Eshet Ish because it's only within your type, essentially.
Right.
And the proof of that is the fact that they had to have a gezerah from the Chashmonai means that it really is not a Dioraita issue at all.
Right, because if it were real Eshet Ish, it would obviously be Dioraita. Is like
exactly.
Okay, so good. Lamanda marmi shum ni dashiv chav goya b'zona. Sfira le de ishut late lahu klal. V'lo gazar mishum eshet ish k'moshe katav zeh haramban zal b'chidushav in kiddushin. Ve'im ken zeh afal pisha chet Yisrael hu.
I think it's afal pisha chata Yisrael hu. This is
hu. Yeah.
Yeah.
ולא חל עליה קידושין כלל להיות אסורה מגזירת בית דינו של חשמונאי כדין עובד כוכבים. למאן אמר משום נידה שפחה וגויה אשת איש, דאין קידושין בבת ישראל לחצין.
Yeah. So I think just maybe, you could say it out if you want, but I can give you
No, go ahead.
So I think what he's saying is, right, first off, there's a good debate in the Gemara about what the Beit Din Chashmonai actually decreed against. Was there even Eshet Ish, right? So maybe there wasn't that. And even so, right, this person, even though they're Chataim, right, they're Chodim because they converted, or it was a harsh thing to say here because I think they're forced to convert. But okay, we're going to go with that for the moment.
Yeah.
They're still Yisrael, right? We have this principle,
right.
Yisrael, and you can't be like, as a Yisrael, you don't fall under the rubric of Nisuim B'nei Noach, and therefore you can't say like, a Jew has a half marriage, like there's a halfway. You'd say like for Jews, you either do Kiddushin or you don't, right? For non-Jews, there might be another thing, but you can't say like, oh, I kind of did it because I did the non-Jewish version. That's we don't have half measures.
Right. There's no way to accommodate that. We just have like.
Yeah, exactly. So, which by the way, I think he really is working in a world of like, essentially there's two non-overlapping legal systems here going on. There's the Jewish,
right?
And the Jewish. So.
Right. Ve'od de ben Noach einan tzricha get de einan b'torat gitin. Okay, that's a little tautological, but fine.
Yeah.
V'kol sheyishlachana habal meveito o tamin hi vo v'teitze meveito harehi knufa gmura.
Yeah.
Like you didn't, right there, we don't enter into this whole Gittin thing.
Yeah, this, by the way, I think is a nice reflection of the Rambam, where he's like, before the Torah, like marriage had no responsibility, and therefore divorce has no responsibility to it. And which, by the way, I think for everybody who is like bothered by agunot issues, it's like, well, why can't we have that in some ways? I understand why we don't have that, but I think that also sits behind this of like, because notice that even she can affect the divorce, right? Otemaini, she's like, I'm done. Yeah. So.
Who's calling me? Sorry about that.
Okay.
spam. Okay. והרייבד ז"ל כתב שדברי אותן הגאונים קיימים במוחזקים בכשרות שהחזקה לא יפרצו בפני עדים לזנות, אבל בחשודים בפריצות הראיות אין חוששים לקידושין. All right, we saw this a few weeks ago, right? So obviously we can't apply this whole principle to people who are חוששים לראיות. So obviously we don't need to worry about.
Exactly.
Right, and then the Rambam, וכן כתב הרמב"ם ז"ל, פרק ד', גבי מי שהוליד בין משפחתו ואומר זה בני, ומשוחררת היא אמו, שהיה ראוי להימנו, לעניין שירש בנכסיו, מתוך שבידו לשחררו ולהורישו. אפילו הכי כתב הרמב"ם ז"ל, שאין מאמינים אותו ששחררה קודם שבעליה, אלא אם כן הוא תלמיד חכם או אדם כשר שחוזק בדקדוקי מצוות. So that's, I guess, just more evidence that like we rely on something we know about the person before we make decisions. אבל אם השאר הדיוט הוא, ואין צריך לומר אם היה מן המפקירין עצמן לכך, הרי זה בחזקת עבד לכל דבר, ואחיו מאביו מוכרין אותו. אוקיי. ובנידון זה ודאי אין לך פירוצים יותר מאלו ההולכים ברצון לנפשן לפני עבודת כוכבים להשתחוות שם. This is charming. ומעשיהם מוכיחים בפריצותם ובקלותם. So obviously this is like a kal vachomer. The people in our case are like even worse because they, it's not just like they're doing all kinds of like sexual bad things. They've given up their whole religion.
Therefore Beilat Znut, like we expected of them at the end of the day. That's the
That's so grim.
Yeah.
Okay. ואף כי בעוונות אחר הגזירה זולתי יחטיא מיעוטה דמיעוטה רבו המצטרפים בזנות של נוכריות, אף כי בזנות של בת ישראל פנויה דנעשה להם כהיתר. אין צריך לומר בקלי עולם כזה שהוכיח סופו על תחילתו שהניחה מעוברת והלך לו. אוי. Right? It's like he left her, he got her pregnant and then ran away. So like obviously he's at Russia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think he adds it, right? We're living in a time like after this Chazarah of like converting people, it's like the number of like good Jews out there is like nobody. It's right. I think that's what it took me 3 times to read this sentence to really get but I think it's what he's trying to say. It's like except for these few people, the meuta de meuta, everybody else here is like a licentious person who because they and like one way to read that is like they're a licentious person because they had to do all these horrible things in order to avoid like bad outcomes. But that means we can't just like rely on the assumption that everything's going well because in fact like everything is not going well. There's a lot to say. At the end I want to kind of like bring this all together and talk about like the language he uses and whether or not like he's using pretty insulting language to help these people out, and it's kind of like how you balance those two. But
right. I have to say, I do kind of admire the way he like a little bit sticks it to this husband.
Yeah, same more.
I mean, I don't know, maybe the husband is like run off because he doesn't want to deal with her anymore and he doesn't care. Maybe he's run off because like actually he's like trying to find a way to like move them all to Holland where things are better. I don't know. Right, like hard to know, but
when we get to the very end, I think he tips his hand as to actually what's bothering him about this husband so much. And I mean, what's at stake here, which is like, we haven't talked about too much yet, but it's, so.
שבעה נקיים והייתה בחזקת נידה ולא טבלה לנידתה שהרי לא היה להן אז אחר הגזירה מקווה טהורה ואם כן הרי בא עליה וויאת זנות מספק נידה. Okay, right, because in this whole scenario where you like convinced her to marry you, etc., and then after the gzera there's no mikvah, so obviously they're having sex in nida, therefore we don't trust them. Sur kared heterat mo beviato ech yichush leisur kal shel pnuya the language of like Isur Kal Shel Pnuya is very interesting because like he knows that it's a less clear Isur than.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like you said, by the way, Yavni, my cursor's where we are right now. And I'll make Sarah go back in a second and summarize for us what we've done. Sorry, Sarah. Just gonna put you on.
I'm late.
What was that, Yavni?
I just said sorry, I'm late.
Oh yeah, no problems. So, but yeah, you're right. He's playing out this game of like that this guy who's been forced to convert to Christianity and is like married in this church. The fact that he doesn't care about Nida, which is, like a real, Karet level Isur, proves that he, of course, wouldn't care about this lesser Isur, as if he cares about what level Isurim are anymore, which he might. Like, that might be realistic, but I don't know.
No, and also, like, just because there's no mikvah, like, I don't know, there are natural bodies of water. Like, calm down.
Yeah, I mean, that's clear if you look at, like, the Raman, Hilchot Nida, they're because he has a whole thing about, assuming that rivers are not, rainwater flowing, but are actually coming from a Mayan, in Europe, that people are dunking in rivers all the time, in their world and in lakes and so forth. But that's, by the way, a huge side note about rainwater, that you can't be flowing if it's to be a mikvah, but water that comes from the earth can be. All right, all side note. It's I know nothing about Hilchot Nida, so I shouldn't go there. But he makes this assumption about these people, but also like a real reality of their world of like, once this Chazarah came down, there's no mikvot available anymore for people, which I think as much he's lamenting the world he lives in, as much as anything else. That's my guess, but
okay.
I don't know, maybe I'm right. Sarah, you want to summarize where we've gotten in the last few minutes for Yavni?
Okay, yeah, let me just like figure out where we started. Okay, so the first claim was basically that, like, since they have decided to get married in this Catholic ceremony, they obviously did not intend for it to be Kiddushin, and therefore also, like, basically she is with him and has the status of a Pilegesh rather than anything else. Then we went through a whole Gemara about how, like, B'nai Noach do have something that is like marriage, but that there's a gzera, not that, like, Eshet Ish is sort of enforced, but not biblically enforced. And then
I would just want to clarify that it's possible that even like a Jew who sleeps with a non-Jewish woman, who's married, has a halacha v'eshet ish, but that's only a gzera of the Beitin Chashmonai. It's not a deraita issue at best. And there's debate about whether or not that was even a Beitin Chashmonai.
Right, and so then that suggests that, like, while they have marriage, doesn't have the same, like, it doesn't have quite the same status, which I guess helps him argue that nothing of halachic significance happened in that ceremony. Yeah. Then they say, oh, while B'nai Noach have marriages, they don't have gittin, therefore. And then we went into a long discussion based on the Rivash, about how if the assumption of Ein Adam Oseh B'ilat B'ilat Znut relies on the person being, like, sort of b'chazkat kashrut, but obviously these people are not, because they converted, and they are obviously because the husband has like gotten her pregnant and then fled the scene, he's like not to be trusted, and also that they're probably having sex in Nida because of the fact that there's no mikvah after this persecution.
So, yeah, the only one thing I'll add to that is he makes this assumption that even though they got married in a Catholic ceremony, and these guys are clearly, like, converted and all that, they're still Jews, right? Chatay Yisrael, Afil Shechatay Yisrael, who, right? That they're still Jews, and the Jews, even though Bnei Noach have a marriage, right? That's not our system, and you can't be like a Jew married in the Bnei Noach system, So even if that counts, it doesn't count for us at the end of the day. Is kind of his main claim. So
the relevance of the Nida issue is that because we know we can tell they must be having sex in Nida, then we wouldn't say Ein Adam Oseh B'ilat B'ilat Znut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, if you're going to do that, well, then of course you're like, you're outside of that, the chazaka, you've left it at this point, according to everybody. So Good. Yavni, you want to pick up for Ein Tzarich Lomar?
Sure. אין צריך לומר, לדעת הרמב"ן ז"ל, המתיר פילגש בלא קידושין, כיוון שהיא מיוחדת לו, ולדעתו ז"ל אין איסור בפנויה, אלא בבא עליה דרך מקרה, אם באונס, אם בפיתוי. אבל הפנויה המיוחדת לאיש, מדעת שניהם, אין בה ביאת זנות. Okay, so just saying that the Ramban says that there is such a thing as pilegesh, and so there's no problem with sex with the pnuya, unless it's like, if it's like a committed relationship.
Exactly. Then you don't even have to make any claim about biat snut, right? Bilat snut.
Right.
It's like they're pilegesh, and therefore like doesn't need to get also. So you know, he's like he's covering all his bases here. So
right. הוא בר מן דין לפי מה שנראה מן השאלה לא היה כאן אפילו עדי ייחוד ולכולי עלמא אין חוששין לקידושין בלא עדים. ואפילו בעד בעד אחד אפילו שניהם מודים אין חוששין לקידושין. אפילו ראוהו שניים, אחד בשחרית ואחד בין ארבעים, אין מצטרפין, כמו שכתוב בתוספתא שהבאתי למעלה, אוקיי, וגם שצריך שיראה הוא העדים כדעת הרשב"א ז"ל, וכן הודו לו המפרשים הבאים אחריו. So basically, if they, like you might have thought like, even if we want to say that there's some edut to the yichud, edut is actually harder to come by than you might think, and there's lots of reasons to believe in this situation there was no edut.
Exactly.
ואף אגב דבקטנה שלא מיאנה והגדילה ונעשית לאחר, אמר רב אין הצריכה גט משני, כיוון שהגדילה עם הראשון מסתמה בעל לשם קידושין, דאין אדם עושה בעילתו בעילת זנות. Okay, right. So this is bringing an opinion from Rav that.
You want me to give you the case? I can help out here if you want. But
sure.
So
yeah,
right,
yeah.
You have a the general case, right? A woman, a young girl whose father dies, right? And she's a yetoma, and she gets married off as a katana to a man. She has the ability when she becomes an adult to say, I actually don't want this marriage and step out of it, right? That's miyun, right? But if she doesn't do that, right? She doesn't do it, and then she marries somebody else. According to this opinion, she doesn't actually need to get from the second guy because we have no safek that maybe she never had sex with the first guy, L'Shem Kiddushin, right? We assume that she did. That's the assumption because Adam lo said bilat snut.
So then her second marriage is not Kiddushin.
Exactly.
Even though we're allowing it?
No, we're not allowing it. We're not allowing it, right? It's problematic, but generally in these cases, if there is a safek, we say that she needs to get from both husbands. Here we just say she only would need one from the first one, rather,
right?
Because we assume that they had at some point sex for the sake of kiddushin in this case, which sounds to be like a case where like there weren't necessarily witnesses, so he's got to deal with this final piece here. So go for it.
Right. So
Wait, I ask one question.
Yeah.
Is it dikevan shehigdila im harishon, like dafka, as in when she became reached sexual maturity, she was with him?
Yes. So
because it seems like the case on its own could be she wasn't ever living with him.
Yeah, no, this is a case where she definitely was living with him. She reached sexual maturity, and the question becomes then, well, according to this opinion, it sounds like you don't really need a huge witness standard to prove that they had sex with L'Shem Kiddushin.
Right.
Okay. So keep going for us, Yavni.
ואמרו בשם הרעה ז"ל, דאפילו דייחוד אינה צריכה, דכיוון דאשתו היא ועומדת תחתיו, כולי עלמא ידי שנתייחד עמה ובא עליה. זהו דעת יחיד, שכל הראשונים ז"ל כתבו שצריכה לעדי ייחוד. So even though we have this opinion, I see. I guess it's an opinion about the Rav opinion. The Ra'ah, who's the Ra'ah?
I can't remember what his name is anymore. Somebody, I think Kohen, but I can look.
So he says that you don't need, for that case, you don't need a Yichud, but all the other Rishon, all the other Rishonim say that you do.
The Rav, excuse me, Rabbi Aaron Alevi, not HaKohen. And he's in the 13th century Spain, just to give you a sense of. So he's a big deal. Like he's not like a nobody here, but nonetheless he's a dat yachid in this case. So
everyone else says you need idei yichud, which is a bit of a forced interpretation. It sounds like of what Rav seems to be saying, but okay.
Exactly. I just want to push in there, right? You see the way he writes this. My assumption is that I don't know if this is true. This is like an assumption because he brought this up at the very end of this tshuva. He could have brought this earlier. I have a feeling like he was writing this and then he probably consulted with somebody. Somebody was like, well, what about that opinion of the Ra'ah sitting out there? And he's like, all right, you know what? I got to throw that in at the end. So it's, anyway, keep going. Yeah.
Nice. ועוד דלג על המנקת כל חומרי הסברות לעגן את זו. So is that just saying that all our other arguments aren't going to be toppled by this one I
think he's saying something even more strong about like a principle of how you do psak halacha. This is why I love this last line. Psak halacha in the case of these like people stuck in marriage cases, it's like let's not grab all the chumrot we can. Like there's and all this. It's like no, right? You have an aguna case, like don't grab chumrot.
Nice.
Yeah, there was a case with a ra'ah. Great,
nice.
Not yachid, I don't care. And he's like throwing that out, essentially.
Nice. זהו מה שנראה לי בזה, וחתמתי שמי, יצחק בר ששת,
And that's, Zikron Bracha, whatever. It's that someone added that, I think, later. But
I hope so.
Yeah. So so that's it. That's his tshuva here. I have only a few more minutes because I have to go, but I just want to put some synthesis. Well, maybe there are questions before I put some synthesis on this, hopefully. So I think, as I said, I chose this partially because I think he reviews a lot of major issues and it brings up some new ones that we haven't seen yet, but also brings up a lot of the stuff we've seen up until now in Kaf Vav and a little bit of Kaf Zayin about the need for witnesses and Amar Hu and Atan Hu and so forth. But I think this is it's really interesting in terms of he's actually very disparaging about these two people who got married in this, even though it seems like they didn't have that much choice potentially, not like there are a lot of secret Jewish marriages maybe going on in their world, or it was very dangerous. But he uses that being disparaging to help her out, which is like an interesting question of how you balance that halachically. This shows up, by the way, all the time.
Similar to the other shoot that we read from Moshe Feinstein, right?
But yeah, where he's very, you think he's also very disparaging there to help them.
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. These reform rabbis, and you also do this in I've seen this a lot in Shabbos halacha, where it's where essentially dealing with Jews who don't keep Shabbos and assuming that they're tinok shenishba essentially, and therefore they don't know, and it's a pretty disparaging way to speak of them, but at the same time, it kind of lets you have community with them. And so it's a very weird balance going on there. But also I think he at the end, he really summarizes what he thinks the job of a posek is in the case of an agunah question in the first place, is you grab anything halachic you can to get this person out of this. And you could say there's also a systematic problem going on there. Why do we have to do this? But which is a deeper halachic question. But at the same time, I think it's really strong of you see more so often if everyone's we have to know mamzerim and he's trying to prevent mamzerim, but we also have to be yotzei l'chol hadeot, and we have to what about this little opinion sitting out there, and he's just rejecting all of that. And the other interesting halachic thing that he pulls that I just kind of want to add is that you notice that, right, we have this principle of the Geonim that the Rambam rejects, but that Ein Adam Oseh Bilato Bilatznut is universal. And here he even pulls an incredible halachic move where he's like, even they would agree with me that they didn't mean it in this case, right? Like, yeah, we have that principle, but come on, not here. And so that's another really interesting halachic move of like making everybody agree with you. So those are my main takeaways for what he's done that are, I think, interesting. But Sarah, you look very pensive, and maybe I shouldn't call you out on that, but in a good way. But
I mean, oh yeah, am I unmuted? Okay. I don't know. I think that like it has a lot to do with who is reading this, right?
Yes.
And the theme with the Rav Moshe piece is like who's reading the Rav Moshe tshuva, like not the person who's involved, but the person who has to deal with them, right? And I guess that like on the one hand, maybe that makes it better, and on the one hand, maybe it makes it worse, because like one of the things that this tshuva and like the Rav Moshe one also tells you to do is to like relate to these people, like
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
even as you're trying to help them, and that just seems like a really complicated dynamic. I don't know.
Yeah, completely agreed.
To say than that, but.
Yavni, you have one word before I have to log off, or?
Yeah, I would just say, right. That you say we're trying to help them, like we're trying to help one of the parties, and the other party really does seem in the narrative to be not doing good.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably bad, or like, I don't know, he's trying to find a way out of like persecution in Spain. So he like goes to wherever. Yeah. And then I don't know, his like boat capsizes, or he dies of some dread, like whatever horrible thing happens, right? I don't know. He doesn't seem like a super upstanding fellow, but like,
yeah,
maybe that's
no. But all right, I have to go, but thank you guys for going through this Rivash. And next week we'll do some Kaf Zayin because we're going to be on that for Siman, I think, for a little bit, and that'll be good. So, all right, have a good Shabbat.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.